So I do a lot of outreach, and kind of here to what's worked, what hasn't. It's kind of the section we're in. But also to talk about how you should pick the project or the type of project you're going to do. Maybe even pick more than one type, and what kind of criteria that you might want to think about for picking these things. So I go with the classic Teddy Roosevelt quote, which is to do what you can with what you've got where you're at. And this really comes down to a few different things. It comes down to your expertise, or the expertise available to you. It also comes down to money. And what can you afford? What can your institution afford? It also comes down to what you can afford in terms of time. So anybody who has ever planned any kind of outreach event knows that the amount of time you think it will take, you want to multiply that by 5, at least. Okay. 10, probably to be on the safe side. Yes, Kimoni is right. And then you also want to think about what your goal is. Okay. What is your goal for your actual event? What is your goal for the people involved? And what is your goal personally? What are you trying to achieve, not only by the event, but for everybody involved in it, including yourself? I think Kimoni's advice is good, especially the earlier you are in your career, whatever that may be, does it help you further your own personal goals? That's a completely legitimate concern to have, in addition to, does it meet the goals of your grant? Does it meet the goals of your institution? So all of these things have to be evaluated when you're deciding, okay, what type of outreach activity do I want to be involved in? There are several different types of engagement. And so far today, we've talked a lot about what I would call our activities, where you're bringing people in, there's lots of things going on, and lots of moving parts, right? So that would be kind of an activity. Okay, so I plan one myself at Geek Girl Con, which is a genre con in Seattle. It's happening next weekend. And that is a 2-day lab experimentation space. So all 6,000 attendees can come through the lab zone and do about a dozen experiments. Each one is hosted by a different scientist. I'm doing one on rose pH changes, a rose indicator. Other people are doing ones about identifying skulls, because we're gross cells. Right? So death works in science. People love gruesome. So this is definitely an activity, right? Something where you have a lot of people, you've got them doing things, they are being active. So that would be one type of a thing. Another type would be, with Kimoni and Rebecca Lai in the chemistry department and Joan Barnes in the libraries, we organize SciPop Talks here at UNL. Matt will be our first speaker in our special Halloween edition. And then in the spring, we'll have about 8 talks. That would be, I would classify that as more of a sitivity. People are going to come to your event, they're going to sit, right? And they're going to listen, right? And they're going to be entertained in some way. So that would be kind of more of a science cafe type of event. Still work to plan and get organizers for and speakers and all of that, but it's not that kind of 100 or 5,000 people running around a state museum, right? There's just a little bit less moving parts. So that would kind of fall into that. But also, especially with the, we're in our which decade of the web, depends on who you ask, our 3rd decade of the web, and you have a lot more ways to reach out to people, like a lot of people are in science communication. How many people have a blog where you write about science? Okay? Or how many people are on social media in some way? Facebook, Instagram, Periscope, Twitter, right? And you're talking about science in some way, whether it's personal commentary or sharing your science. So another way would be also to participate in podcasts. So I've done a couple of podcasts for the Royal Society of Chemistry. So that's definitely, that's almost a sitivity, right? So you're not going anywhere, no one's coming to you, but you're putting some type of science outreach out in the world that people can activate. They can utilize it when they wish. Okay? So that's another thing. And I do a lot of genre cons, number 1, because they're fun, number 2, because I'm a giant nerd. So Dragon Con is where this picture is at, and we did a science of Archer. So how many people have heard of Archer, the cartoon? Okay, that's Lucky Yates. He voices Dr. Krieger. And so I'm dressed as Lana. That is actually me. And so we did a whole science of Archer panel podcast. Dragon Con is about 60,000 attendees. And so our panel only had about 500 people in the room. but it's also available on the web. So it's another kind of a Sitivity that you can do. Now people are coming to you, but again, the level of organization there is a bit different. And the other thing that I do is called Ask a Chemist. It's a hashtag mark. And the old folks in the room will, myself included, will remember when that was not called a hash mark. It was a number. So I do something on Twitter sometimes called Ask a Chemist, and I also write a blog on the same title of if you have some type of chemistry question or a general audience does, then they're going to put it on Twitter. If I don't know the answer, I will retweet it. There's lots of chemists on Twitter, and they will, in fact, tackle the problem. So it's a Twitter chat kind of a thing. And so there are lots of different levels of engagement you can involve yourself in. Which one is right for you and your institution? Well, that gets back to what expertise is available to you, and not only available like literally in your institution, but how much time does that person have? Are they willing to go to your event or host something wherever they are? Again, budget constraints. How much time do you have? How many emails, organization, and committee meetings do you want to be involved in? So all of this type of thing means that maybe instead of trying to always plan this grandiose, I'm going to plan this whole thing and it's going to have, an all day with like thousands of people. No, maybe for what you need to do and what your goal is you're just going to host a Twitter chat. And so those are really gaining in popularity. How many people have participated in a Twitter chat? Okay, a couple. How many people have seen them in progress? Okay. And I think these are really great Sitivities, low-hanging fruit. Probably one of the best ones that is run is from the CDC. They do one called Grand Rounds. I am not a medical professional, but I find this whole Twitter chat is fascinating, and I always learn something. So the CDC runs it. This is one of the CDC's employees that's talking about what's coming up on the next Grand Rounds, and they tackle all types of topics. Some like immunization, when something happens. They also talk about sexual health and public health issues. When they have some kind of a West Virginia chemical spill, I think that was early last year, they had one that was topical about that. Also, the White House does several Twitter chats. One is on African American education, teaching and students, which is, if you're involved in education, is really an informative one. And I've been involved in these. They're easy to organize in comparison to some of the other outreach things that I've heard about today, where you're just thinking in your mind, oh my gosh, that must be a lot of work. Okay? Not that these are no work, but they do offer some different challenges and some different benefits. One is that your speakers and your audience can be anywhere in the world, right? Now, there are time zone issues, but there's ways to work around that. But your speaker or your level of expertise is no longer bound to a physical location because you're having this event online. Okay? That also means that your audience then is not bound to driving to wherever you are or walking across campus. They can be literally anywhere. And those two things can be really exciting because you can open up the expertise available to you, and you can reach more people depending on your topic. Okay? So these things can be very exciting. They might make some folks nervous, but again, there's always ways to work around that. Number one is that you can really make your event global. And if you're trying to talk about chemical safety or anything that has to do with, like for myself, I'm a forensic chemist, and you're trying to talk about that kind of angle from a different cultural perspective the world over and what's going on in research, then these things can be really exciting because even if people are waking up on the other side of the world, they can just click onto the hashtag and the conversation is running 24 hours a day, and there's always something new to learn. So I find that part really exciting. And also, your reach is extended beyond, having SciPop talks at UNL is great. Okay? It's a bigger audience than at Doane, but it's still at UNL. Right? And when we've had an active hashtag and people are participating, we've had people participate in the Twitter chat for SciPop talks from Italy, from New York, from Hawaii, from Nova Scotia. So there's a lot more people that you can reach, and you can think about your reach in a different way. The other thing is that the time is expanded. the time that you can reach people and the time that you can learn from them and the time you can give your presenters is they can be in the comfort of their home wearing pajamas and participating in their kind of scheduled event. Or they can be in their office and take a half hour to do this thing. Because when you're trying to ask people, especially with outreach activities, they're doing the work for free, right? Just like you're probably doing the work for free. So someone said activation barrier earlier. It's like you can really lower the activation barriers. You don't even have to be wearing pants. You could be eating ice cream and chugging coffee at home and just be answering people's questions. Okay? And the cool thing is in your area of expertise that you get to dictate which questions. It's a little bit harder to be in a room and someone asks a question, you're like, I'm not answering that question. And you move up. That's harder to do, right? Because the question, as if you've done enough public speaking, you're like, I'm not even sure that's relevant, but I have to say something about it. So if you're on the web, yeah, you might get that, but you can just be like, I'm just gonna act like I don't even see that tweet, okay? So there's some, kind of comfort to that. Also, we always want to come back to thinking, or I always come back to thinking, what's my expertise? What's the budget situation? How much time is this going to take? And what is the goal? Okay? Because how many people are at academic institutions? Okay? And how many people are at, say, government institutions? Anybody at private institutions? Okay, so no. So money is not growing on trees. Okay? And you have budget constraints. You also, more importantly, I think, more importantly than budget, and I can't even believe I'm saying this, more importantly than budget is you have time constraints. Even if you can get away with a certain budget line, you have a life of your own. The people you're asking to be involved have a life of their own. What can they do with the time that you're giving them? And that's why with engagement opportunities, it's almost a good idea to have different levels of engagement. Maybe have that one giant event you're gonna do, depending on your staffing capabilities and who you can have volunteering. And then maybe do, let's host a monthly Twitter chat. It's a low kind of energy thing. We can all be at home eating bonbons. This will be great. But we can still make an impact on those because those Twitter chats can be storified and retweeted and become news stories. And your experts and your expertise becomes the thing that's cited. And isn't that what you want? Is you want to be considered an expert and you want your work to have impact. So as anyone who's ever watched the news, how many times have they shown a tweet from someone? In fact, that happened today. Someone showed a tweet from someone, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson. So that actually has impact and will carry weight. So I would encourage you to kind of pursue that. You always want to think about, again, what will it cost? What will it gain? Do you want to do one or more? Okay. And I would also encourage you is that you need to have a social media plan. How many people did an event and you had a social media? That was in minute one of your planning an outreach event was, what's our social media plan? Came out of someone's mouth. Okay. I'm that person that will be in a meeting and be like, what's our hashtag going to be? That will probably be my first question because your PR nowadays is all about social media plan and social media reach. If your outreach plan does not include that, you are doing outreach wrong. It needs to include that. Okay? Because you can have a little outreach thing that maybe attracts 10 people, but it's blown up on social media and all of a sudden everyone's talking about it. And it makes it seem as if it was the best thing since, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, which are pretty tasty. So you must think about a social media plan. Okay? This does not mean to panic. This is a lot to think about. But don't panic. Okay? I'm telling you not to panic because there's plenty of help out there. How many people here are at UNL? Okay. Do you know we have a social media expert team? We do. Do you know we have a communications office? We do. Do you know we have event planners on campus? Several of them in several different departments. We do. How many people are outreach coordinators? There are a lot of them. You should be calling these people to get help for the event you need. How many people here, if they got an email from a colleague saying, I heard about that cool event, I'm not really sure how to pull it off, but maybe you can have some tips. How many people would actually respond to the email from a colleague if they asked you for help? Okay? So don't go it alone. Don't reinvent the wheel when it's been done before because you're the cost too, right? And so you need to think about what is it going to cost you, and can you still do all the things you want to do at the level you want to do them, meet your institution's goal, and not wind up curled up in the fetal position underneath your desk. Okay? So I'm happy to talk more. I think our contact information is floating around there somewhere. More about outreach efforts in the state. I hope to see you all, the ones that don't have an 8-hour drive. I hope to see you all at SciPop Talks in the spring. Thank you.